Hi everyone, this is Laura Fiorvanti. I am so sorry. We had some technical difficulties with our original Cava recording masterclass. And so I am recreating our recording just so that it is another resource for you in the course of your studies. So thanks for your patience, and I'm really excited to talk to you about Cava and what makes it so special. So let's get started, shall we? It'll probably be a slightly quicker class, just strictly because we don't have the class participation and people on the other end of this. So yeah, we're still going to learn a lot. So I wanted to talk about the Cava DO. And the first thing that is significant about Cava and the Cava DO is that it is actually one of the few regional designation that's what we call a roaming DO, which is to say the Cava production is primarily in Catalonia, or in the north eastern corner of Spain. However, it is not mandated that all Cava be made from the region of Catalonia. So primarily, yes, it is made in a region or a town called Sant Sadurní d'Anoia, which is part of Penedès and Catalonia, but technically you can make Cava all over Spain. So we're going to discover a little bit about that. But just to get our bearings, I wanted to point out that right here, when we're talking about the majority of Cava production, we can see that it's mostly centered around Catalonia. So we always start with background and history. This is not just for Cava production, but for Catalonia in general. Originally, the Tarraco or Tarragona was one of the most important Roman settlements all over the Iberian Peninsula, and it's situated along Via Augusta. So the region was relinquished from Moorish rule and joined the Frankish kingdom. In the 1100s, there was text that describes Catalunya or Catalanese as their home. And it's a reference to the fact that the region has a cultural identity and independence that is so different than the rest of Spain. I even see in my travels when I visited Barcelona or the region in general, that it's almost like a really sort of unique place that combines the culture of both Spain and France, but it's neither or both. So in 1137, Catalonia becomes united with Aragon, and in the 1640s, the Catalans defined the Spanish crown and placed themselves under the authority of the French king Louis the 13th, rather. A very fun thing, in 1818, so very, very early on, Europe's first 8-hour workday was set by the Catalan labor reforms. So one of the most influential and perhaps pioneers in Cava production and in sparkling wine made in Spain was a gentleman named José Raventós. Still, the Cavas from Raventós are some of the best Cavas that we can find, and very much rooted in a boutique style. But he crafted Spain's first traditional method, sparkling wine, with the emergence of phylloxera in France. A lot of vineyard owners from France and a lot of vintners traveled to other places, of course, Spain being one of them, and also Spanish vintners and Spanish landowners traveled to learn about the fine wine regions of the world. And so in the early 1870s, or late 1860s, José Raventós fell in love with champagne, thought about, we can make great sparkling wine in the same method that is high quality in our own regions in Penedès. And that was really one of the most important things that happened with Cava production. It's really important to note that the only method for making Cava is Cava DO, is the method traditional or champagne method. If you're not using champagne method, so for example, if you're using Charmat or if you're using other ways of carbonating beverages, you cannot call it Cava. You would have to use vino spumante, spumoso rather. I'm talking Italian. So anyway, In 1960s, the world's second fastest growing economy due to industry, tourism. So it's really one of the best places to visit in all of Spain, along with Madrid, Catalonia, Barcelona. There's so much influence of like modernism in a very early time in this region. In 1888, the first International World Fair was held in Barcelona, and it really put Barcelona on the map. And there was this idea of modernism and playful and Catalan impulse and industrial prosperity. And along with that comes sparkling wine, especially at a high level. So 1979, they gained autonomy. But when we think about the region, Barcelona, and of course, Catalonia, we think about the beautiful sort of tourism, things that you can do. Art Nouveau in France really influenced some of the beautiful architecture, and you see these curves in a lot of these buildings with Gaudi design. Of course, you know, you have really just like architecture that is different. It's more decorative, it's more excess. So some places listed here that we think would be fun if you're planning a trip to taste Cava and visit Penedès and you want to see some sights. That's really amazing. So we have some pictures here. The Sagrada Familia, really an important part of an unfinished church. Catalan architect Gaudi, and you know, it's been this ongoing process of restoring different parts of the cathedral. You know, you can visit the Park Well, and you know, just an incredible place. So really feels like you're in some other planet when you're visiting. It's just incredible. So geography and climate, we always talk about this too. It's one of the few places where fine sparkling wine grows that is not a extremely cool climate. And I think that's really important in describing the differences between your Proseccos, your Cavas, and your Champagne. So, you know, when we think about the cool climate of Champagne, we think about high acid, we think about lean styles of sparkling wine. Well, it's a lot different here. We have an influence of the Mediterranean climate. We have hot, dry summers. We have cool, rainy winters. So that is really important because you do get a different quality of fruit in Cava that is so, you know, complementary to that of the great champagnes of the world. What we find mostly in, at least in Penedès and San Sidori de Anoia, are these soils that are alluvial. They traveled by water. There's some limestone and clay with little pockets of granite and slate. The slate in the area you may have heard of when we think about the production of Priorat. We look at the soil called licorella, and licorella is like these giant, big quartzite black slate stones, and you see these vines just digging into these amazing stones in order to find root. And what gives a lot of minerality to the great reds of the Priorat Montsant, Conca de Barbara, but also to the Cava production in this area specifically. So there is an important kind of review here of the Spanish quality system. We call Cava DO, or Denominación de Origin. So it's important that we know that the DO is the top of the quality system, along with another designation that is specific to, you know, Priorat and Rioja, which is called the Denominación de Origin Calificada. So essentially, just like the French AOP system, at the top of the pyramid, you have Denominación de Origin, and a couple of qualified regions have one step even sort of superior to that, called DO Calificada, with the Q in Catalan. So these are the top two in the pyramid, and they are usually really strict with their aging requirements. So for example, when you're looking at Rioja, you have different aging requirements: Joven, Crianza, Reserva, and Gran Reserva. And In Spain, it's a strong tradition of releasing wines after extended aging. So we don't really have these requirements in Italy, or sorry, we do have them in Italy. We don't really have them in France. And, so Italy and Spain really kind of take the burden of bringing those wines into the cellar and keeping them back. So in the case of Rioja, we have our Gran Reservas aged for 5 years. In the case of Rioja Reserva, 3 years. And Crianza, you can have a year, 18 months, and Joven, meaning young wine. So as we look at the different DOs, each DO will have aging requirements for white, aging requirements for rosé, aging requirements for reds, and they're different, but the whole idea is that if the winemaker takes the burden of holding back the wines in the cellar, of course, not being able to sell the wines, monetize, then perhaps they're more appropriate or ready to drink when they hit the market. So I think that is really unique. The fact that we still have these incredible age-worthy wines that are being released and are affordable is one of the things that we have to say thank you to Spain for. I mean, under $100, a wine with 10 years of age that is just released on a wine list. That's pretty special. So the quality designation system was formed in 1926, modified in 1970, and there's local Consejo Reguladores. There's local governing bodies that control and regulate their individual DOs. And you'll see them in sherry, you'll see them in cava. Often your Consejo will regulate and make sure that there's a standard and quality levels that are being upheld in all the regions. So after the DOC, there's IGP regions. They're sort of like a regional designation below the DOC and DO, and they're called Vino de la Tierra, or wine of the country. Not really seen in our country, but we do, when we visit Spain, see a lot of, just simple Spanish red, which might be called Vino de Mesa. So the sort of 4-tier system, Vino de Mesa, Vino de la Tierra, DO and DOCA or Calificada is really the standard of which we have throughout Europe. And then in addition to that, we have a quality level in Spain, which is called Vinos de Pago. And Vinos de Pago is a designation for an individual estate. So you have these regions that DOs that maybe were not as celebrated or weren't as well known, but they have these leaders or these estates within these DOs that really needed to make a name for themselves. And so these individual estates submit their wines and go through a process of which their winery is given a high designation called Vinos de Pago. So something to keep in mind. We have Cava classifications, and we have a classification in Cava for what we would call, I guess, Cava, the entry level. In this classification, the aging requirement is 9 months. Then we have Reserva, and actually it was just updated. Reserva, I think as of 2020, has to be a minimum aging of 18 months. So they just raised that Reserva to from 15 months to 18 months. Then we have a Gran Reserva, which is a 30-month minimum aging sur lease. And then finally, we have a new, established as of 2014, which is called the Paraje Calificado, which is modeled after the vintage champagne. For this quality designation, there's a minimum of 36 months. These single vineyard quality locations within the Cava DO are applied for. There's lower yields, and these individual estates would be what you would think of as, the single vineyard. So 3 years sur lie, very special places designated as a special, not only from what grapes can go in it and how long they age it, but really the site, the region where these great exposures and beautiful grapes are allowed to be ripened. The term Cava literally translates as cellar. It first appeared in the mid-1950s. In 1972, we see the official reference to Catalan sparkling wines made in method traditional. And the DO, as I mentioned in the beginning, it really does cover specific regions from 7 autonomous regions. Another important contribution from the Catalan and Cava producers was the invention of a gyro palette. It's called a girasol. It was first used in Penedès. It holds 504 bottles of sparkling wine, and it essentially gyrates. This was one of the not only helpful things for the production of Cava and making it less expensive, but was also instrumental in helping the champagne producers as they're using this as well, because traditionally champagne had to be riddled or turned by hand, and it would take a worker, something like 8 days to turn, a couple of 1,000 bottles of wine. In this method of hand riddling or turning a quarter turn each day, but with this invention of the gyro palette, we're seeing an easier way to rotate wine or help with the disgorgement process. There are the key Cava grapes that are called Macabeo, Jarelo, and Parellada. You can think of them like local grapes. Within that local grape, those are the predominant majority of the grapes used in most Cavas. With that said, we still are allowed to use other grapes. For example, 2 other white grapes that joined Chardonnay and Malvasia. And then for 4 other red grapes, we have Pinot Noir, Garnacha, Monastrell, and Trepat. We're going to spend some time towards the end of the presentation really talking about what does Macabeo or Pinot Noir or Trepat add to a Cava, and that makes it really different. So you can start to hone in on the grapes themselves and what is special about them. The Corpinat, heart of the Penedès region, was established in 2019. It is technically no longer part of the DO Cava. These Corpinat producers are all organic. They are self-regulated, mandated, hand-harvested, estate, bottled, aged for a minimum of 18 months. And these really special sort of producers band together and decided to not be part of the DO Cava, which was really a bold move, and form their own organization that could distinguish the quality of their wines from, let's say, some of the bigger mass-produced wines. And so those are some names. I love Gramona, especially their Rosé, Torello, Canfejas. They make also some really good still wines, and Lopart is another favorite of mine. So hold on one second. I just want to stop sharing for a second. Something is slightly wrong with the presentation, so I just wanted to bring it up to fix it real quick, because we do have some other great info I want to share with you. So just give me one second. I'm not sure why some of these slides decided they want to be hidden, but I just have to unhide them, and then we can continue with discussion about these grapes. Of course, technology is not my friend in the last Cava Masterclass. Okay, so let me start sharing again. Sorry about that. Let's start sharing. All right, so let's continue. So we were talking about these producers that left the Cava DO and formed their own organization, and now it's time to talk about the 9 grapes permitted in Cava production. So I mentioned we have the white grapes of Jarelo, Parellada, Macabeo, Chardonnay, and it's called sometimes Malvasia, but it's technically Suberat parent. We'll discuss what is different about it from other Malvasia strains. And then Pinot Noir, an international grape, Garnacha, one of my favorite red grapes, Trepat, and Monastrell. So those are our 9 permitted grapes, and we'll get into them. So for white grapes and their characteristics, Macabeo, first and foremost, 17th century, widely cultivated from central and lower Penedès. It is a very long cluster that is very compact and has thick skins. And the beauty of it is it ripens late. It gives a real fresh and fruity style, and it really has a lot of racy acidity, which I find lovely. Jarelo, another grape that is thought to be related to Macabeo, which is 99% of it is coming and grown in Catalonia. And the first mention was in 1785. This grape has also a very thick skin, which makes it really great for the Mediterranean climate. But the bunches are more medium, and they're really rich in sugar. So they contribute body to a blend. They're higher in alcohol, more richness, more decadence. So when you have Jarelo as a still white wine, you might liken it to that of like some really beautiful unoaked Chardonnay. I love Jarelo, like from Canfejas, I was saying, but it also is a really great for adding mid-palate and fleshiness to the age-worthy cavas, especially vintage. From Parellada, it is technically from Aragonia, very high in productivity, but also equally high in acid. So when it's really allowed to shine, it is grown in higher altitudes, and it does really, really well. It adds structure. So you can imagine you have a fruity nature and elegant with acid from the Macabeo, some more alcohol and body from Jarelo, and some really great production grape from Parellada, but also really elegant when grown in the right places. Chardonnay was first approved in 1986. These are some of the most long-lived cavas that are made with only Chardonnay. Some of the characteristics are similar to that of the Blanc de Blanc champagnes. And we also have our grape Subrat parent. Sometimes it's said to be Malvasia. So there's all these like talks that it's sometimes related to Malvasia, but it originated in Extremadura. And it's the same as an old Spanish variety, which is called Alige. For me, when I've had the opportunity to taste it, it adds white floral, and it's unfortunately really prone to fungal diseases. So not as widely planted as the other sort of 4 premium Cava grapes. For red grapes, Garnacha is grown all over the world, of course, but it's thought to be a Spanish grape. To me, it's sun-kissed red fruit, and it's often used for rosé cava. And actually, a fun fact is that it must be the base for the base of rosé cava must be 25% from red varieties. Interestingly enough, you are not allowed to blend grapes for rosé cava. You have to use Sangnier method. So you must use Sangnier method for rosé cava. With that said, we also have the beautiful Trepat grape. It's from the region of Conca de Barbara. It's intense in color. Sometimes you'll see like these deep, deep, deep purple, kind of magenta colored Cava rosés, and that is usually when they have some Trepat in the blend. But it's very elegant and distinguished and complex and so intense. Then we have Pinot Noir, and Pinot Noir was first approved in 1998 for our rosé, and Pinot Noir was approved for Blanc Noir in 2007. So it's still relatively new in Cava production, but it's thought to be a critical part of helping Cava age, and lots of structure, which is beautiful. And then last but not least, we have our Monastrell. Monastrell was mentioned the first time in 1381. The challenge with Monastrell is it's really susceptible to drought, and it needs very high temperatures. So it can be a beautiful black sort of sun-kissed fruits, but yes, it is really finicky in that it can't grow everywhere. And then as far as Cava production goes, we have Macabeo, which is the most widely planted. It's about 36% of the percentage of the vines are planted to Macabeo. Jarelo makes up about 25%, and Parellada is about 19%. And all those other grapes that we talked about, they only make up 20% of the total land under vine of Cava. The vine density has to be a minimum of 1,500 to 3,500 vines per hectare. You are allowed to use both Gobelet or bush vines and trellis method, and they're both used, maybe not equally, but in significant proportions. You can see a little picture of the Gobelet here. And yields for Cava, you'll see that they decrease as the quality increases. So we have 80 hectares per hectoliter for Cava, Reserva is 66, and for that Cava de Paraja is 48 hectares per hectoliter. So with that, I'm going to conclude our class. I hope you enjoyed. There was a lot of buzz about Cava in the New York City. We did some Cava Ornata flights. We had a Cava walk around tasting party. So hopefully you attended one of those. And if you have any questions, please reach out and have a great day. Thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording.